Yeah, it's the worst. Just the worst. But thank you for doing this. I appreciate you taking the time. I know we were going to do it and then something happened with your cat. So I wanted to make sure the cat was all right.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. Our cat has been having like some health issues. Like for the last few months, we've been trying to just figure out what's going on with him. But it seems like, thousands and thousands of dollars later, he has like some sort of little bacterial infection, which is great.
Yeah, that's
how it goes.
Yeah, I do. No, we have a cat, and the cat might as well be our child for as much time and attention and worry and all that. And our cat has had lots of it's like our cat has a lot of dental issues, and we spend more money on the cat's medical bills than like my entire family's combined.
Same. Yeah. That's how we thought our cat was a dental problem at first. So then we had dental work, and it's just like, but there's nothing you won't do for them.
But yeah. So where am I catching you right now? Are you in Chicago?
Yeah, I'm in Chicago. I'm at home. I have like a few weeks at home to kind of just like chill and work on music and like just hang out, which is nice.
Have you been like hitting the road pretty heavy recently?
Yeah, it feels like the last like 6 months, things have like really picked up for me. I was mostly just doing like gigs around Chicago before then. And so now I'm kind of like, I had some shows in London and then, kind of all over the US. So it's been like picking up and getting used to like being gone all the time.
Yeah. How is that aspect of it going? Because that's a big adjustment for sure.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm used to traveling quite a bit. So the traveling part's not so hard. It's just the like chaotic schedule that's a bit difficult, especially because I have pets.
Right.
So it's like having to coordinate people to stay in my house with my pets or take the pets and like, things like that. That's just kind of like, I actually recently had to buy like a physical agenda book because I'm like, the phone, like Google Calendar is not the best thing for me. I like have to write things down. So it's a learning as I go thing.
Yeah. Well, and that's yet another thing because the pet thing I relate to because our cat can't be alone. He's very needy and like attention starved. And so, anytime we're gone, I get someone to stay in my house. It can't be just like a visit. It has to be someone who stays there. And it's expensive. Yeah. It's a whole nother.
It is. I feel like we're pretty lucky because we have a lot of friends here in Chicago that a lot of them still have roommates or like they live in the suburbs. And so our house is kind of like a bit of a vacation for them. So luckily we have like a pretty good group of people that are happy to stay in our house when we travel.
That's good.
Takes a lot off my shoulders because I trust them and my cats and my dog like them. So it makes it easier.
Yeah, that's really nice, actually. I miss it. So Chicago, I lived in Chicago for about 10 years and that's kind of, and it's where I kind of really started my DJ career as a professional, quote unquote. And so I wanted to talk to you about Chicago. I'm very excited to talk to you about Chicago because I feel like I was there. Now it's been probably over 10 years since I lived there, but it was such a formative time for me and the club scene and the DJ scene. It's like, it's always kind of going to be home in my heart. And
I love that.
Yeah, it's the best. To me, it's still the best city in the world. Probably it's still my favorite place.
I agree. I wholeheartely agree with you there. I love Chicago.
So talk to me a little bit, and this is almost purely just for me, but talk to me a little bit about the Chicago club scene and how you got into it originally. Because, you've been born and raised in the area, right?
Yeah, I grew up just about an hour north of the city, but I've been living in Chicago for over 10 years now. Moved here straight when I graduated from college. The club scene here there's some places that haven't changed at all, probably since you've been here and even further back. We have Smart Bar and Spy Bar, which are like the two staples, Chicago house music. So we have those two clubs, which are still like, they're my two favorites. And then since then, the scene has changed a bit. We've added some new The Mid closed down. The Mid was another legendary club.
The Mid, I played the opening weekend of the Mid when it opened. I was so sad when it died. Yeah.
That is amazing. Yeah. So the Mid was like, one of my favorites, and it closed. And I actually live like 4 blocks from where the Mid was now. This whole neighborhood has like turned into like something completely different. So I like walk past where the Mid used to be to get my coffee every day. And I'm like, oh, tear.
Yeah. Because wait, what is it now? Somebody told me.
It's Google.
Oh, yeah. It's so shitty,
It's
man.
Google. It's like, it's so heartbreaking. I knew when they tore it down, we were like, somebody paid a lot of money for this real estate. And then they built the Google building and I was like, oh yeah, okay.
Just the worst.
Yeah. Taking our culture for Google.
Yeah, right. Exactly. When I was coming up there, it was like Wicker Park was kind of the heart of like I'm talking about sort of like late 2000s, early 2010s. It's like Wicker Park, like hipster scene was really big. So it was all like, Debonair Social Club.
Debonair's still thing. Yeah. Debonair's still sick.
And like, is Evil Olive still there?
I actually think Evil Olive might have just closed like within the last year. But, they used to do that porn and chicken thing all the time.
Yeah, that was big for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
was that your era? Were you like going out when that was still a thing?
Yeah. So I moved here in like 2011.
Okay.
And it was still a thing. I think like at that point, music was kind of like, it was like that, like for me personally, like when I moved into the city, there was like the house clubs and then there was a lot of EDM, like a lot of like, big room EDM. So I feel like Porn and Chicken went like, or not Porn and Chicken, Evil Olive. I think one time I went there and like, who was like, Don Diablo was playing.
Okay, yeah.
So it like turned into like that kind of that kind of scene there. Debonair is still cool. Debonair is still like kind of like vibey music that you can go like catch something a bit different. Yeah.
I mean,
but when I came,
no, I'm sorry. Please, no, go ahead. I want to hear what you were going to say.
No, it's okay. I don't even know what I was going to say.
Well, all I was going to say was that was one thing I always loved about Chicago, but it was a conflict too. Was like there's this this incredible history of house music in Chicago, and like you said, the house clubs they're sort of evergreen. They don't change. Mm-hmm. It's always just this home for this culture, but then it was weird like being in sort of the burgeoning EDM scene at the time as well, where for me, it's like I loved all of it. And so I love the fact that I could go to Smart Bar and watch Derek Carter and then hop over to, whatever it was, Congress Theater and go see Justice or Steve Aoki or whoever was there, that kind of thing. Like I love that dichotomy, but it was also kind of an odd thing because you could tell there was sort of a distance between the two. Like it was never as intertwined as I guess in my mind it should have been.
Yeah. And it's still, honestly, it still is kind of that way. Although Congress closed, now we have Concord, which is like attached to it. But it's the same thing, actually, you know what? Maybe not. I mean, Smart Bar is Smart Bar and will always be Smart Bar. And Smart Bar, they book like, although they've been booking a lot of like UK based stuff, like sort of like, I think they just booked Ben UFO recently, but they're still booking like really cool underground music. And that's Smart Bar's thing.
Right.
And Spy Bar has kind of started doing a bit of everything now. You can go to Spy Bar on any given night and it could be like, Stacey Pullen. And then the next night will be whoever, something like a more of an EDM act. But the promoters here, this group Aris, they have opened a couple of new venues in the city, and they've been doing a really good job of booking like underground acts in bigger spaces. And then like, you know what I mean? Yeah. Because it was before, in order to hear those cool acts, you'd have to go to like a tiny, tiny club, which I love those tiny clubs, but it's cool to see these artists like play to larger groups of people in Chicago. Because before it was kind of like you had the Mid and then Argonne Ballroom, which like doesn't suit a lot of artists.
Yeah, that's a big room. I mean, it's now you've got me thinking, and I'm kind of just spitballing here. This could be totally wrong, but I wonder if we're getting into an era for underground music where people are going to start trusting the events a little more, because I feel like for so long, especially with the EDM boom, it became so much about sort of the rock star headline artist, and that's what would draw people. And, you know, the sort of more local, like community-based events, in some places, I feel like we're not doing as well kind of as a result of that.
Yeah, definitely.
And I wonder now, I mean, there's a lot of promoters around the country that have kind of taken that, for lack of a better term, you know, don't shoot me, but like the boiler room model of events where it's kind of just, people might not even know exactly who they're showing up to see, but they just trust this name or this event.
Trust the vibe.
Yeah, trust the vibe, exactly. And I'm seeing that more and more, because there's like, I didn't know about that group in Chicago, but that's great. There's like Def in Atlanta. You know, I mean, a few different people in LA.
I think like Lights Down Low in LA, they do really cool stuff.
Totally, yeah. There's a group, I'm in DC, there's a group called New Androids here that put on a bunch of great shows.
I love that, like the smaller collectives that are kind of taking back the reins a bit and saying like, listen, we're not just like booking big names to get money on tickets. We want to like curate a night that's going to be sick, even if you haven't even heard of these people.
Yeah.
And then they like gain the trust of like the people that come, and then they spread the word. It's like kind of going back to like grassroots, like stuff with music, which I love.
Yeah, it's more local again, because that's for me, you know, that era I was talking about, like late 2000s era. What was so fun when I was just starting off was it, you know, every city had its own little party. And you would go there, you know, if you were lucky enough to be able to go play them. And each one was so different. And the music you would hear at each one was completely different. And, you know, it was this little window into a whole nother world musically, culturally. And that was so fun. I feel like that kind of got lost later in like the 2010s a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like maybe there is like a bit of a resurgence happening, though, because like, you know, you see people all the time online complaining like every booking in every city or every festival, like they all look the same, like they're the same artists all the time. Whereas like it seems like, one, because for these smaller collectives, these artists are less expensive to book. So they're like, it's like requiring people start digging a bit and see like, okay, what about Midland? When was the last time you saw Midland on a lineup?
Right.
Like, okay, let's bring Midland because this is going to be sick. So it's like, it's cool that that's happening. And I feel like those are the parties that like personally I'm like more interested in.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, to bring it back to you, you know, you moved back to Chicago. Where from?
I'm from Rockford. And then I went to the University of Tennessee for college.
Got it.
So I did some time in the South, which was like an interesting experience, very different from what I was used to.
Yeah.
And then came back to Chicago right when I graduated.
And were you, where does your club history start? Like growing up in Rockford, was dance music a part of your life as a kid? Did you hear it somewhere? Like, how did you get introduced to it?
So I actually grew up, I was like very, very heavily into rock music growing up. And when I grew up, I like, when I was a kid and into my teenage years, I listened to what was electronic rock without even realizing that what I was listening to was electronic rock, like even like Massive Attack or Pink Floyd or Nine Inch Nails, Prodigy. You know, like these are things that I like grew up loving, but didn't even think about like the technical elements of the music or like what it was. So then I moved to Tennessee, which is like as far from an electronic scene as you can possibly get. Kind of stomached country music for a few years, which is not my thing. And then honestly, I was into electronic music at that point. Like, I think I went to like a Swedish House Mafia concert or something once. And I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, didn't get super into like that sort of dance music, but it opened the door to like explore other sounds.
Sure.
So that's what kind of ignited like my interest in dance music. And I knew like being from near Chicago, like Chicago House. But to me, that was just like Frankie Knuckles.
Right.
Like Marshall Jefferson, you know, like old school Chicago House. I hadn't really explored house music. And then when I moved here, I think I just like one of my first weekends here, like went to Spy Bar, and I was just like, holy shit, this is like the coolest thing ever. There's like a whole community here. And like from that point forward, it was just like all day, every day, all I did was like dig deeper and deeper and deeper into dance music. Like what's going on in the UK? What's going on here? Where did this start? Like learning about Blog House, learning about like those days of like Fidget House and like, you know, where all these things came from and who started them. And it was just a really fun, like learning experience for me.
Yeah. I mean, you're taking me back with a lot of this because, I have similar stories for sure. And another thing, not to harp too much on the Chicago thing, but I think that's another amazing thing about a city like Chicago. New York has it to a certain extent, London to a certain extent, where there's an amazing history to it, like you said, but then it's also living history because a lot of those legends, a lot of those originators, not only are they still alive, but they're still there and working and playing out and creating. And you can actually, you know, go experience it, which is such a rare thing. It's something I only appreciated later on, almost after I had left Chicago. Because once I was in a place where it wasn't happening, I was like, oh, wow, yeah, that was that was something special.
I mean, we are like super lucky. On any given Sunday, you can like head over to Smart Bar and you might see Derek Carter just put on a house and disco masterclass.
Yeah.
And like, you know, it's really like a unique place in that way. And it's really special. And it's easy to fall in love with it.
Yeah, that's the other thing, right? Is there's something about seeing it right in front of your eyes that makes those, at least for me, it made those connections in my brain of like, oh, this sound came from that sound, and this is how this is related, and this is why this new thing references this old thing, you know, all these things just click.
Start hearing the samples, like, oh, this old disco track is sampled in like, you know, this song from this year, and like just things like that like really sparks like so much inside of you.
Yeah, it's literally like going to school in a way, you know, like it's really like going and sitting in class, which I never really thought about until now. But yeah,
it is.
Yeah, he's putting on a class. And so, you know, for you, once you get back to Chicago and you're starting to discover all this stuff, did you have a group of people with you, like who were all kind of stoked about this, or was this sort of something that just connected with you and you were just gone on your own trip? Like what was your life like outside of the club stuff at that point?
Yeah, because I'm from so close to here, I had like a group of friends that moved to Chicago as well. And it's funny, the people that I'm closest with now that I became really close with then, we like all bonded over this like collective experience with like music. And so like they're like people I've known my whole life, but we weren't very close when we were younger. And so we all kind of had this like explosive moment of like, wow, we are living in like this place where we can go do these things that are like so special to us all the time. And so I got really close with this group of friends that like collectively our like whole relationship revolved around music. And we're still like they're still my best friends. And so that kind of like, I feel like my whole experience moving to Chicago was like, yeah, I work here to pay my bills, but like, this is what's really going on in my life.
It's the best. It's the best in some ways to me, because again, I had a similar experience when I was there around that age. And I mean, it's still some of my best memories of my entire life. Like no matter, you know, it's like you've gone on to travel the world, play all these festivals, put out music that, you know, people around the world love, all this stuff. But for me, it's like, man, it's hard to top those memories when I was just like a dumb kid running around with my friends.
I agree. Like things just felt so, I don't know. Yeah, it was a really, really special time. Everything was like new and exciting and light and like just like overwhelmingly like lovely.
Yeah,
everything
absolutely.
was.
Well, okay, so I'm bouncing around a little, but I like to ask this question while we're on this subject is like, how do you keep that spirit for yourself now that things are getting to a bigger level? It's becoming maybe a little more serious. You know, that intersection point when your passion becomes your full job, what you rely on financially, all that kind of thing. Like what's the most fun part of what you do now? Like what keeps you excited now?
I think honestly, like what will always keep me excited and something that I hope I hold on to forever is like my like genuine love of listening to what other people are making. Like, I don't ever want to stop digging for music. I don't ever want to stop standing in the crowd at other people's sets. I want to like feel the way a crowd reacts to certain types of sounds. And, you know, now that I've gotten more analytical about music, sometimes I feel like I spend more time dissecting songs than just listening to them. So now I just like want to hold on to like that, like just love of listening to music and like how it makes me feel and like discovering new sounds. Like there's so much music, even though, you know, I've like consider myself pretty well versed in dance music at this point, but like I'm constantly hearing new things and discovering new artists. And like I can spend, you know, days and days just like diving into like this one subgenre that came from Bristol at this time. And like, there's just so much to learn. And I think that I just want to hold on to that forever.
You nailed it. This is like my favorite thing to talk about. It's so important to me that if you are an artist or somebody who participates in any kind of culture like this, you have to still be a fan. You have to, in some way or another, it's like you got to hold on to that part of you that is still just sort of the innocent kid, excited about it. Like you said, appreciating what other people do. Because I think it's so easy to kind of just get on your own island and sort of float away when it's a whirlwind, you're traveling, it's crazy. You play a show, you don't get any sleep, you got to play, you know, all that. It's so easy to kind of just get a little isolated from that and just go inward. And yeah, you nailed it, man.
Definitely.
You gotta be a fan.
Yeah. I hope to always be a fan. I think that's something that I have to prioritize. Otherwise, you can tell, you know, even sometimes with other people's like music, you can tell when people stop taking the time to listen and to like learn new techniques and to like experiment a bit. They're just like, I'm good and everyone likes this type of thing that I'm doing, so I'm going to keep doing this exact same thing.
Yep.
And then you can tell that there are artists that like are experimenting and are like paying attention to like what other people are doing and checking their egos a bit and being like, you know what? Like I could do something different, or I could like learn from someone else.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I don't know. I just appreciate that.
I do too. And it's interesting to talk about because there's definitely, you know, giant artists that are kind of doing the first thing you talked about, where they've found some kind of success with a certain thing and then just ran with it. And there's nothing wrong with that. And, you know, I got respect for anyone who's making a living doing this kind of thing because it's hard to do. But it's when I see an artist do that, it is always a little sad to me because it's kind of just like to me, it's like, well, you're just leaving. Like,
yeah, you're settling.
Yeah, you're settling and you're kind of just leaving the culture of it behind. Like, you'll have fans who are going to follow you and like whatever you do, and you'll probably be fine and happy and successful. But it's like, you kind of stopped like playing with the rest of us, you know? And for me, that's
definitely.
like the most fun part. Is like that. I don't know. I sound like I'm getting up my own ass now, but it's like that conversation that you have with everybody else doing it kind of all the time, of like what you were saying, hearing what somebody else does and being like, oh, that's interesting. Let me try you know, my version of this. That's the most fun part for me.
And I feel like as an artist, it's like your job to sort of be not just educating people, but to be giving people something new, especially like when you're DJing. Like, I want to be in the crowd and I want to hear something I've never heard before.
Yeah.
And, you know, and be like, whoa, what the fuck was that? And like, you know, like, I don't want you to just play all of your hits, which some people really appreciate that. And some fans get mad if you don't do that. But I like myself personally, I want to be taken on a ride and I want to like leave feeling like I just like absorbed something that I've never felt before or heard before. So I don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. That moment of discovery, there's nothing more powerful than that moment of discovery. And from a fan perspective, of course, you want to see your favorite band play the hits or whatever it is. But you know, you got to draw a line because otherwise you just end up being a jukebox. I mean, for you, like how did you start DJing once you know, got into this scene, got obsessed with the music, all that? How quickly did you start wanting to, you know, participate in other ways?
Yeah, pretty quickly. I, you know, I was DJing for a couple of years before I ever even like did it in front of anyone. Like it was like a thing I did in my kitchen, you know. It was like, I've always felt really good about my like my song selection ability. But like learning the technical skills of DJing was something that, you know, took time. And so it wasn't until I guess during COVID, when I had literally nothing to do, I would just DJ in my kitchen all day, every day, work on music all day, every day, start like trying to make my own music all day, every day. And it was really like those like 3 years of just like absolutely nothing because I wasn't working, couldn't really leave my house, like just kind of dove completely into this thing and realized, you know, I'm actually kind of good at it. Like I can actually kind of do this and like it's working. So then after COVID was when I started taking like small bookings on the city. I had also just launched my own sort of club night in the city, which is something hopefully we can talk about at some point.
Yeah, I'd love to.
I run a club night here in the city called Dirty Disco that's like focuses on creating more female friendly spaces in underground clubs because the club scene just has a tendency to move towards a bit more like masculinity and girls stop going to clubs because they don't feel comfortable. So I wanted to create a night where I booked underground acts that I'm really excited about, but then also create a space physically that feels a bit more feminine and encourages a bit more like respect and like just a bit less aggro vibes, you know?
Absolutely.
I mean, less aggressiveness.
Yeah. I mean, that's very needed. You're spot on with that. And can we talk a little bit, because I just the idea of it is interesting. Like, how do you go about making the space, the party, have that feeling? Like, is it physical things you're doing or putting in the club? Is it like instructions you're giving to the staff? Is it just like a community of people that is talking outside of the party? Like, what goes into that?
I think it's a bit of all of those things. So before we had some time before Dirty Disco launched officially in a club because clubs weren't open yet. So it gave me some time to like communicate about what it was going to be and make this like very clear with like my marketing efforts. Like, this is what it's all about without straight up saying like, this is a night for women. I don't want to say that. I don't want to have to say that, but just to say this is a night, like an inclusive night, a sexy night, a night like, you know, like just kind of this like more like female led stuff, you know, like the way you talk about things, it can come off very masculine or a bit more feminine, you know? So that's how it started, was just kind of spreading the word that this is going to be something different. It's going to be in the spaces you're familiar with, but it won't feel familiar. You know, we're starting fresh and we're going to do this differently. And so then once the clubs opened, I actually went in, we started at Spy Bar.
Nice.
Was such an incredible opportunity. Spy Bar agreed to give me a Thursday night.
Huge.
Yeah. And so we did some reoccurring, we did five parties at Spy Bar on a Thursday night. And I went in every week and I decorated Spy Bar myself. Nice. I bought like thousands of dollars of disco balls and flowers and like just tons of crap, really. And went in and hung like camo nets above the ceiling, hung all of my disco balls, like I did it all. And I wanted this space to feel different when you walked in. And it did. And so from our first party, which we booked Huxley for our first party, who's one of my friends, and he came and, you know, the music was fantastic. And we sold out the first Thursday. And it was just like, you could just tell the energy in there was different. It just like, you know, there was so many girls like super dressed up, like on people's shoulders in Spy Bar, which is like, you know.
Yeah, for anybody listening who doesn't know Spy Bar, that's a tall order.
Yeah, like it was explosive. And people left that night feeling like it was special, which made me feel really good because that's what I aim to do. And then since then, it's just kind of gotten better and better. And I like feel kind of like Mama Bear at every show. I'm like out in the crowd, like, is everyone having fun? Like, what's going on? You know? But it's doing really well. And the response to it has been really positive. And I feel like now that I've started my own like project with Azzecca and, you know, that's starting to grow, I'm taking Dirty Disco with me and hopefully we can kind of like get to a point where we're curating spaces like in other cities or collabing with, someone like Lights Down Low or like one of these other parties in another city to like do this like thing that feels really cool.
Yeah, that's such a fun story. I threw a monthly in Chicago for years and years, and I kind of miss, it's super stressful, but I do kind of miss that, especially the pre-show, like you were talking about, going into the club, making sure everything's right, putting up your own stuff. There's like, it's funny because, people don't really see that side of it. But then I think when people come to an event where the thought really has been put in like that, just as a club goer, as an audience member, you can somehow just sort of instinctively tell when someone's really put the thought behind it.
Yeah. When there's like love in something, you can really feel it. And, when we started Dirty Disco, we really did want it to end up being the sort of thing that's like, doesn't matter who we book. They might not be the biggest artists. You might not have heard of them yet, but just come and like trust us as tastemakers that the music's going to be good. And just know it's going to be a fun night, like no matter what.
Absolutely. So, and it's really interesting that this has all kind of been post-pandemic. So, when you were sort of teaching yourself during the pandemic, DJing, production, any of that, did you have any experience with it before? Did you have like any kind of mentors at any point? Was this like straight YouTube university? Like how did you pick up all this knowledge?
Well, I mean, I was pretty green. I had like played around with making music years prior. Didn't really do anything, made some like horrible loops, basically. And then, so my husband is a producer DJ. He is one half of Gorgon City. So being married to him, obviously, like I have one of the best teachers in the world.
Yeah, he's amazing.
He's like a prolific sound engineer, a great producer. Knows everything there is to know about music. So I had been, sitting with him for years in the studio, just like absorbing things from him. And then when COVID happened, he was working on his last album. And that's when I really just sat and learned from him all day, every day. That's what we did. We woke up and we sat in the studio. We DJ'd while we made dinner. We had like our decks on our kitchen counter. And it's just, that was our whole life. And when he was finishing his album, I would sit and I would play some guitar licks, or I would play some chord progressions. And it got to the point where my suggestions to him were, he would say to me, these are really sick ideas, but they don't work for me. I can't I can't use these ideas on a Gorgon City album. So I really think that you should try and do this yourself. And he he taught me everything that I know. And he really, really pushed me to start making my own music and to start DJing in front of people. If it wasn't for him, I probably would have never taken my first gig, that I played to literally no one in a restaurant. Right. I was shitting myself with nerves. But if it wasn't for him pushing me and guiding me and obviously teaching me that none of this would have happened. So I've had the best mentor in the world.
Yeah,
for that, I'm very lucky.
Absolutely. No, he's great. I love him. You were saying you were playing guitar. Were you musical as a kid? Do you have any other kind of musical background pre-DJing?
Yeah, I grew up playing the flute and the piano.
Nice.
So, but I have an uncle who's very, 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 I have an uncle and a cousin who are both extremely talented musicians. And I grew up with them, playing music with them at their house, playing the piano with them. I was in a competitive band.
Okay. Wait, what's a competitive band? You would go to band competitions, that kind of thing?
Yeah, tournaments, band tournaments.
Nice.
So I've always been musically inclined, but
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's also, I guess, an interesting point. We touched on it a little bit, that a lot of this maybe mindset change happened during the pandemic, but was music always kind of the passion? Was it always the thing? You mentioned that you were working in Chicago. What were you doing pre what you're doing now?
Yeah. So music was always just a hobby and a passion of mine, but not something I ever thought I would do for work, in a million years. I graduated from college and I actually just had no clue what I wanted to do for work. And I had a friend who lived here who was working as a live-in nanny for someone who worked very high up at this marketing or this real estate company here in Chicago. And she was like, well, they're hiring someone for marketing. do you want to come like have an interview? And I said, sure. And literally like went and had my interview. And this woman was like, okay, I would like to hire you. Do you have an apartment in Chicago yet? And I said, nope. And she said, okay, well, I have an extra apartment above my garage. Can you come move in this weekend?
Oh, wow.
And I said, sure, why not? And I took this job, like first interview, took this job, moved to Chicago, didn't even have my own apartment. Did that for like 5 years. And then I've always been really creative. And that job felt like it was more businessy and not creative. So I left that job and actually took a job for an interior design magazine, which was really cool. And then eventually I got my interior decorating license. I wanted to start my own interior design business.
Okay.
And then COVID happened.
Right. Well,
and here I am.
You're right. Yeah. It's wild, man. We can never predict. But so what did you go to school for in college?
Psychology.
Oh, psychology. Okay. There you go. So you've done a little bit of a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. My dad, I think my whole life was like, oh, what the hell is she going to do?
What did your folks do?
My dad's a firefighter.
Okay. Man, yeah, Chicago firefighter or like Rockford firefighter?
Rockford firefighter. Yeah, he's retired now.
Man, does he fit what I'm thinking of when I think of
to a T. Yeah. He's even bald. Big Italian dude, just like exactly what you'd picture.
I love that. Did you really have like the sort of stereotypical like Chicago area, big Italian family upbringing?
Oh, yeah. 100%. Like my family lives pretty much all within walking distance of each other. Like Sunday dinners at my Momo's house, like super, super over-involved Italian family.
Man, that's incredible. I just love hearing, because it's such I think people know that exists, but then it's so rare you meet someone who's actually had that experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's definitely like straight out of like, if there was like, you know, like a TV show or something about like Chicagoland Italians, like my family would be right there.
Do you think, you don't have to have an answer for this, but I always just wonder how the early years sort of affect us later in life creatively. Like, do you have a sense of how that kind of upbringing, big family, communal dinners, any of that, like how that affected you as the person you are now or as the artist you are now?
Yeah, I think my family played a really big role in like leading me to where I am now. I like, first of all, having such a big, loud, abrasive family. I have a super thick skin and I'm very, I guess, hard-headed, and it can be a pain in the ass sometimes, but like I stand for what I believe and I go for what I want, and I'm like not afraid to speak my mind. And my family definitely ingrained that in me. And that's something that, especially now as I'm getting into dance music and working in the industry, like being able to hold my own is super important, I think. My like fondest memories growing up are like of me and my dad listening to music at home. Like we would do it all day, every day, just go through his records and like listen to, you know, everything from like Bob Seger, Fleetwood Mac to, you know, Pink Floyd, just like, music was my whole life with my family. And then we go to my grandma's and we'd be listening to Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin. And like, it's just like music was everywhere constantly. So, I mean, it makes sense. I've always been super, super passionate about music. It's just how it dwindled down to this was all fate.
Sure. Yeah. But yeah, it's always kind of been in the background, always kind of just woven into whatever was going on. It's interesting too, talking about like that attitude going into the business now. I mean, I think that can only help you, because especially when you're starting off, not that you haven't been doing this for a long time, but you know, there's like so much potential to your project still. And I think that's such an important time to really like, stick to your guns and not, you know, you can take advice and all that, but not be too influenced. Because I'm sure as it keeps growing, you know, there's more and more people who have opinions about what it should be or what you could do and all these things. And I've been talking to a bunch of people lately about how the importance of kind of really just at the end of the day, trusting your instincts, even when, you know, somebody else really seems like they know what they're talking about.
Yeah, definitely. Intuition is huge. And like, you know, especially when it comes to like what I consider to be art, like if you do something and you love it and it feels good to you, like stick to that. Don't, do what you think other people want you to do or whatever. Like just make something, if it's like coming from a genuine place, and it'll feel genuine and it'll like translate to other people.
Are there parallels to that? You just got me thinking now. Are there parallels to that in interior design? Because a lot of times, I'll talk to somebody about production on here and, it's like, oh, well, yeah, I kind of learned it like the quote unquote wrong way, but, then that turned into my sound, that kind of thing. Is there like sort of a similar thing in interior design where sometimes, just like doing it a weird way or breaking the rules ends up being kind of your own thing?
Yeah, I think so. I think like most great interior designers, like they all have like such a distinct style, and it like had to come from somewhere. Like if you saw my house, it's like a literal urban jungle. It's like in out of context, like all of the things I have in my house make absolutely no sense. But they're the things that I love and that they speak to, like it speaks to me. And so I think like it's the same thing for music. Like if you really love something and like you can tell how it's going to feel, like you feel it. So other people will as well.
Yeah. And I'm sure too, that's serving you well as far as like designing the Dirty Disco club nights and all that. If you already kind of know how to arrange a space and, have intentional objects and all, and like the changes that you make to a space, how is that going to affect the way you feel in it? That kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. It's all about, it's like especially with, I guess Dirty Disco would be like the exact like melding of my two passions, because I got to create the space that made people feel all of these things. And then I got to curate the sounds that like complement the space. So it's just like, it's a really special thing. I love like Dirty Disco so much. It's like made me so happy to be able to do this.
It's so fun, man. Yeah. I hope you keep doing it because that sounds so cool. And I'm really glad you are. Along with I did want to make sure we talk about your production. I feel like that's something where, publicly you've only put out a few tunes so far, all of which I really like, by the way. But I'm sure at this point you're gearing up for quite a bit more. So I wanted to ask you just in terms of production-wise, kind of where your head was at, whether this is short-term goals or long-term goals or even just more existential goals, kind of how you're feeling about the Azzecca project at this point and what you want to do with it.
It also feels so new to me, honestly. Like I went from not wanting to release any of my music and not like basically having the guts to like do any of this, to all of a sudden Diplo wanting to sign one of my songs. And then it's just kind of like snowballed from there. And I'm loving it, but I'm not really thinking so much about like the future.
Yeah.
I know that sounds crazy. It's probably not like what people want to hear, but
no, I think
just want to keep making music. And I still think like I have a distinct sound and I know what my sound is, but I also think it's still evolving in a sense. Like my Cassie edit was a song that I literally just made for my DJ sets because I love the original. I wanted to just make this like cheeky thumping techno Cassie edit, and it got released, and that's awesome. And that kind of like kickstarted everything. Other side, like it's doing so well. And after I made that song, I was like, this is shit. Like no one's going to want this song. It's like felt like chaotic to me. Like I was ready to just bin the song until Sam from Higher Ground, like I sent him my demo folder and he was like, what the fuck is this? And I was like, just this garbage song I made. But so I'm still just like, I have so much music made now. I have like, well, okay, not so much. I have like 6 releases planned for this year so far.
That's a lot.
Which
good.
Is really, really cool. And they're all songs that like I'm really proud of. Like I think after I saw how people resonated with Other Side, I realized that like that's not just chaotic music. That's like your style. That's like something you liked it when you made it. And just because like the 4 people you sent it to didn't vibe with it doesn't mean it sucks.
Yeah.
So I really kind of stuck to that sort of feeling, but went a bit more techno with my next songs because I love techno music so much. And like, I really like this fine line between house and techno is like where I find like the most like satisfaction from music. And so I'm also like super influenced by like sounds coming out of Tel Aviv right now. I'm like obsessed with everything that they're doing. And so I'm like trying to do my own little take on that sort of like twangy, like synths and like, I don't know. I feel like every time I go in the studio, it's just like, okay, I found an arc that I like, and now let's just see what I can do from here. And I don't know, it's exciting, but I'm not like thinking about like what label will take this or where can I sign this or what can I do with it. It's just like, I just want to make the music, and if it's good, it's good. If it's not, okay.
That's great. I mean, I feel like that's kind of almost the best mindset you could have at this point, because you're following the fun of it. It's like, I talk to a lot of different people in like different stages of their careers on this podcast, and a recurring theme for everyone, especially people who have been doing this forever, is like you're always kind of trying to get back to the point you're just talking about right now of like that pure creativity, just like had a fun idea, follow it, see where it goes. At the end of the day, that's kind of what it's all about, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, it's easy for that to get lost the further you get into your career, and then you're signed to a major, and then you have like major label breathing down your back. You have to finish an album. You have to do this. You have to do this. Like it's easy to lose that. And I'm sure, I mean, knock on wood, if my career continues to like go in the trajectory that it is right now, like I'm sure I'll cross those things at some point. But I started doing this because I love music, and I realized that I wanted to hear something that I wasn't hearing. And so I wanted to make it. And I think that that's like, I just want to do that forever. I want to keep making the music that I'm not hearing anywhere else.
The best. That's the absolute. I love that. It makes me wonder too, this is kind of an open-ended question, but in the time that, you know, this has really started taking off and you're putting out releases with big labels, you're playing shows in other countries, festivals, that kind of thing. Has anything in that either surprised you, something you weren't expecting, or maybe you learned something along the way that sort of changed your attitude or your perspective about what you're doing, how you're creating?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like the more experience you have playing in like other countries, like that will definitely like change your perspective on things. Like I know that I've spent a lot of time in the UK, and I've become obsessed with music that I'm hearing in the UK, and like certain bass lines, certain like percussive bits, like just like things that are different from what I was hearing all the time living here. So I think like being there, and all of a sudden I'm in the studio and I'm like, okay, I think I want to find like a really sick rim shot, which is something I don't use in any of my like songs, you know, like I want to start using like more lo-fi percussion. I want to have these like really insane bass lines, like things that like you don't know until you experience other things, you know?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like the more you experience, the more that'll like affect what you're doing.
Yeah. And the way you see different people in different places in the world, like experience the music and react to different sounds that, you know, maybe it wouldn't work in Chicago exactly the same way as it does in Tel Aviv or in London. And when you there is that sort of connective tissue again, kind of like what we were saying with, you know, watching Derek Carter at Smart Bar, where once you see it, it kind of just clicks. I think that's true.
I also think like, you know, I'm in a unique position where not unique, but what I want to do is like the sounds I hear, you know, in Tel Aviv or in London, and then my like roots here in Chicago, like I want to like find a way to put all of that into my music. Find like the sweet spot where like all of these different elements from all of these different genres can like exist together in like one song or one body of art.
That's the key. That's the holy grail, you know, is like being able to to combine all of your influences, all the things you think are cool, all the things that go into who you are as a fan, to bring it back to that and be able to kind of present that in a way people can connect with. I mean, yeah, that's the holy grail right there. I think that's a great goal.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Well, as we're kind of bringing it home here, let me ask you, with everything kind of taking off, you put out the Other Side EP with Higher Ground, and it's getting this great reaction. You're traveling more. Things are getting more hectic. You got to find people to take care of your cats, all of that. Do you have any... Well, I should take it back even a little bit further. has this introduced any extra stress, anxiety, just general exhaustion, tiredness into your lives? And if so, how do you deal with that? Do you have ways to keep yourself healthy, happy, just generally stoked about what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely because again, this is all pretty fresh to me. I'm really just getting my bearings, and there's stress and anxieties coming from the fact that I'm just putting myself out there.
Yeah.
For the first time, really, ever in my life to a larger audience. I'm, exposing myself to things that I'm not used to, criticism, people with their opinions and things that they like to say on the internet, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
That's stressful. Luckily, I've been able to kind of so far not let that affect me. But then just monitoring my stress levels in general, being home and creating a schedule for myself, prioritizing eating well, exercising, getting sleep, really blocking off segments of my day. Okay, you're going to go to the studio from this time to this time. Then you're going to come home. You're going to cook yourself dinner. You're going to be in bed by this time. When I find that if I'm physically not well, mentally, I'm in shambles.
Yeah.
It's very hard for me. And especially with creativity, if I feel like shit and I go to the studio, I hate everything that I do. I leave, I come home feeling worse than I went. Yeah. It's just it's a domino effect. So I just really want to take care of myself and prioritize taking care of myself, physically, and then mentally, that will all kind of play into it.
It's a great point. Yeah. Yeah. Taking the physical part. I was just talking to somebody about that, where it's hard to overstate how much the physical part of it goes into the mental part of it. And that, it doesn't have to mean that, you're somebody who just goes to the gym for 8 hours a day, 7 days a week kind of thing. But yeah, there's whatever it is for each individual that kind of just gets you a little active.
Even just going for a walk.
Yes.
Some days, if I'm in a really piss poor mood, I'll just go for a walk and breathe some fresh air and move my body a little bit. And then I'll realize that I come back with a sort of a different state of mind. Just because it's really easy. And I've even been, I've had moments in my life, especially coming out of COVID, where I just stopped moving. I just was sitting at home all the time. And then that becomes normal to you. And you forget how good it feels to just do an activity, just to leave the house, or to make a healthy meal, or, it's just it makes a big difference. And then you want to do it more. And then it becomes just a normal part of your life.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I was just talking to, I don't know if you know the producer Nostalgics. She does more bass house and a little more electro-y or heavier side of house stuff. But we were talking about this idea of almost looking at yourself like a character in a story, and being if something's not working out or you're not taking care of yourself, it's almost looking at it oh, well, it's weird. That's not what this character would do, because who you are inside, right? So it's this is a weird choice. This isn't what they would do. This story doesn't make any sense, and kind of trying to remove yourself from the immediate feeling of whatever it is, depression, anxiety, and just, using that as a device to kind of get back on track.
That is such a genius way of thinking about things. I love that so much. I'm getting when you're playing a game and the screen prompts you, should you go for a walk or open a bag of chips and sit on the sofa? Right. What would this character do right now?
Yeah. And it's just trying to, at least for me, sometimes trying to just because I can get in those, once you get in the bad habit and you get in that rut, it's hard for me to break out. Yeah, you're just there. So it's sometimes I kind of got to stop myself and just really try to separate myself from the moment, if that makes sense. But I'm really enjoying this conversation. Is there anything else we haven't talked about? Anything else you wanted to get out there? Anything I didn't ask you before we do wrap it up?
I don't know. It's been such a fun conversation. I feel like I can't even remember all the things we've talked about.
That's been great. I had a blast. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've touched it all. I guess I guess I should maybe talk about my music that'll be out soon.
Yeah, let's do it, please.
I have a remix for a really cool act out of the UK called Tabasco that will be out in like 2 weeks, actually, February 24th or 25th.
I think by the time people hear this, it'll be out. I think I need to check
cool.
that. But yeah, it's great. By the way, I heard it. It's really good.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. So I'm really excited about that. I love Tabasco. I love this EP that they put out. When they asked me to remix it, I was super stoked that they asked me, because I think that they're making some really cool, unique music right now. And we're kind of at two different ends of the spectrum. So it was really cool to put my spin on something of theirs. And then I have another song, probably my favorite song that I've made thus far. It's called Ego Death.
Okay. Sorry. You start over one more time. You got a new song called Ego Death.
Yeah, and it's like my favorite song that I've made so far. I love it so much, and it will be out in March on Realm, which I'm super excited about.
Yeah, you're working with such great people too. I mean, I love everything Higher Ground does. Realm, I'm a big fan. Again, maybe this is too far into the future, but with your party and like kind of that community building aspect of it, would you ever want to do something like that for records, like a label, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's definitely something that has been talked about. I think it makes a lot of sense down the road to do something like that. If the opportunity presents itself, it would obviously be amazing. I use my platform already in booking Dirty Disco. I've booked a lot of up and coming female artists, and that's a big part of my, whole thing. So it would be really cool, not even just female focused, but just to be able to champion artists that are like coming up that I really, really like. It would be really cool to do that. So maybe someday.
Well, this has been really, really fun. I've just got one final question. I ask the same question at the end of each one of these podcasts. Just looking for a memory from your life, a moment from your life. Could be from any time, could be from when you were a kid, last week, doesn't matter. Just a memory you have where in that memory, in that moment, music really had a deep impact on you, really hit you hard in that moment. And that could be something as simple as, the right song played on a nice sunny day and put you in a good mood. It could be, something you heard as a kid that just is tied to a nice memory. There's no wrong answer, kind of just the first thing you think of.
So I have this one memory from when I was maybe 9 or 10 years old. My mom had this Jeep Rubicon car, this hardtop Jeep. And she used to live in Indiana. And so I would go up there on the weekends to stay with her. And I have this distinct memory of her playing one of the Eurythmics albums, in this Jeep with the top down on a summer day driving down the highway. And I was just like, Here Comes the Rain Again came on. And I was just like, what is this song? I need to listen to it 10,000 more times. And I think my mom and I, that was our song for the longest time. We'd get in the car and play that song. It's just still to this day, one of my favorite songs ever.
That's such a good, how old were you, do you think, approximately?
I think I was 9 or 10. I was really young.
That's so good. Because that moment, that's the moment we were talking about earlier too. That's a fan moment. That's a DJ moment of just what is this? Whatever this is.
I've never had like this before.
Yeah. And just I need this immediately. I need to know everything about it. I need to hear it again and again. That's perfect. That's DJ brain in a nutshell.
Yeah.
I love that.
Good.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I really enjoyed talking with you. This was fun.
Yeah, it was really fun. Thanks for having me.
Oh, anytime. Yeah. And come back anytime. We can do it again. Yeah, I think that's it. I'll let you go. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Cool. Thanks. You too.
All right. Take care. Talk to you soon.
See you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.